The modeler has always been looking for the most real effects. It is an endless search that leads us to investigate the most varied products in the market with the sole purpose of reflecting reality in the most exact way possible. In most of the cases, the enamel products are the preferred solution by modelers. Their main virtue is their slow drying, which allows us to calmly work the color, as well as giving us the capability of correcting possible errors quickly. The techniques based on the enamel are numerous and diverse, and they include effects such as fading, rust, grime, or mud. But they also include more specific effects such as oil or wet effects. Although techniques with enamels are quite simple, we should be careful not to overdo it, or we could ruin all of the previous work. As in almost all of the techniques, those dealing with enamels are overlapping techniques. That is to say, each new layer should allow the previous work to be seen, and only the sum of the layers together will give us an acceptable result. In this DVD, we will cover the most current and basic techniques that will allow us to do all the processes of weathering in a military vehicle, from basic washes and filters to complicated fading, streaking, and wet effects. Of course, you should apply these techniques to your models since they are universal techniques that are valid for all themes. We can use very diluted enamels to make very subtle transparency effects. This way we will be able to modify the base color, changing its tonality, and we will enrich the surface with more shades. With a mixture that is a little more dense and with dark colors, we can bring out the joints and details to increase the contrast among the different components of the tank. With different oil colors fused together with paint thinner, we can unify the surfaces with camouflages and do the fading. The sides of the vehicles always show a dirty aspect as a result of the dirt accumulated and dragged by the rain after many weeks in the battlefield. The special enamel products for these types of effects are the best solution to do them quickly. These are denser enamels than the washes and the filters, and they are usually special colors for these effects. We are now going to do those 4 basic techniques in this piece. This way we will be able to compare the result for each one. On one side we will make filters and oils, on the other, grime and washes. We will begin with the filters. We can make them ourselves, or we can opt for some that already come prepared. Of course, the prepared ones will save us a lot of work. The filter must be applied evenly on the surface. It should be quite transparent and subtle, and we should avoid it accumulating in the details. We can apply diverse filter colors in different layers. On the other side, we will make a wash so we can see the difference. We can dilute the products of AK Interactive with thinner to get some more subtle washes. These products are designed to make washes and streaking effects. Contrary to the filter, the wash should accumulate in the details and joints using a dark color. After it is dried off, we will stump it with a brush and enamel thinner. The marks that appear when drying the wash are stumped easily with a brush wetted and thinner. As we can observe, there is a great difference between a filter and a wash. Both are good for different things. The filter varies the base color and it gives it a chromatic richness, while the white wash highlights all the details. Now it is time for fading with oils. We can use different colors, clear or dark, for this technique. We will apply small quantities of oil with a fine brush. Then, with a flat brush wetted in thinner, we will fuse the small stains with vertical movements, cleaning the paintbrush and wetting it again to avoid accumulating the surface with an excess of paint and white spirit. The result should be uniform and subtle, but it is not about mixing all the colors, but rather stumping them. Lastly, we will make streaking effects of grime, that of which we will make with a specific product by AK Interactive, or we could also make our own home mixture with Humbrol enamels. First, we will draw a group of vertical lines in a random way, as much in longitude as in distribution. Once dry, after 10 or 15 minutes, we will stump them with a paintbrush wetted in thinner with vertical movements until they become subtle. As we can see, the results are very different in spite of the fact that we have used very similar products in the 4 techniques. The main difference among them is the diluter ratio and the way of applying them. As we have seen previously, the dissolving of the enamels is what differentiates a filter from a wash and a streak. The filter has 90% thinner and 10% paint. The wash has 75% thinner and 25% paint. And the streaks 40% thinner and 60% paint. To make this small example of diluter ratio, we will use a dropper or applicator to count the drops, although it is not strictly necessary to be exact. For 90% thinner, we will add 9 drops. For 75% thinner, we will add 7 or 8 drops, and so forth. This way, we will be able to make our own homemade washes or filters using Humbrol colors or other enamels. Although it is important to note that the prepared products are not made of paint and thinner, but rather they are processed in a different way with ingredients like stabilizers. Now, using the same method as with the drops, we will add the color 1 drop for 10%, 2 or 3 drops for 25%, etc. We stir the mixture and we will paint on a surface to see the difference between each one. But let us remember that it is not only the difference of intensity between each technique that is important, but also the way to apply them will produce a different effect in each case. The filter is the easiest and simplest technique to do. It is applied just after the base color. The products specified for filters are the best for saving us problems and time. They only need to be shaken and applied directly to the surface of our tank. Diverse colors also exist for each base color. An absorbent paper to eliminate an excess of color and some round paint brushes will be all that we need. After shaking the product well, we will apply it gently on the surface, always painted with acrylics. It is important to distribute the color in a homogeneous and uniform way, making sure that it doesn't accumulate or flood. The difference between the filtered area and the base color is subtle, but enough to change the tone of the color base. If we apply a lot of color by mistake, it must be spread out quickly. In the vertical surfaces, we should be careful to avoid that the filter accumulates in excess. To remove the excess liquid, we can use an absorbent paper, pressing smoothly. Once the first filter is dry, we can apply others with diverse tonalities to improve the surface even more. We can use almost any color for filters, clear or dark, given that their transparency makes each layer appear very subtle. We can also apply selective filters, but only in some parts. This will give a lot of realism to our model. Let us remember that the filter is a very soft technique. The results will only be evident after several layers. We can correct a base color that has come out very light without having to repaint our model. We should not forget that the filter must wet the surface, and it should never flood it. The effects will always be subtle and should be distributed regularly across the entire surface without letting them accumulate. The washes have always completed the function of highlighting the details. Also, they improve the model's contrast and clarity. The wash is, without a doubt, an important and necessary technique. After having painted the base color and filters, the joints, details, and rivets will be the selected areas to apply our washes. To make the wash, we can dilute any enamel product with a 25 or 30% white spirit. We will use a soft and round brush to apply it. We should deposit the mixture in the joints and details with precision, although we will be able to clean the excess later. Once dry, we will use white spirit to clean the excess of the wash. The brush should be wetted in the thinner, not flooded. This way, we will only remove the excess of paint. In some cases, we can allow the paint to run by capillarity. All the marks of dry wash will be cleaned with thinner and the help of a flat brush. We have been able to highlight all of the details and improve the contrast thanks to the wash technique. It is an easy and simple technique. This is the simplest way to do fading. The oil technique is very simple and it only consists of 2 steps. We will begin applying several oil colors such as white, brown, ochre, and blue, although the exact selection of colors is not very important since later they will all blend smoothly. We will put a small quantity of color on a palette to be able to catch the color more easily. We will always begin applying the lightest color, and we will distribute the color in small stains in the areas more exposed to light or the general fading. Then we add the ochre color, although we can also use other colors like gray or buff, like in our case. In this king tiger, we have preferred to use softer colors, although later we will see how we will go adding more intensity. Now, observe how we will place the brown color. We put it around the details and in shadowy areas. All the color strains should be placed with logic. Lastly, we will put the blue color stains very near the details to accentuate their shades. Of course, never put this blue color over a dark yellow base of a tank, since when stumping it will leave an aspect of green color. Now, with a flat brush and thinner for enamel, we will begin to stump the small points of color. With vertical movements, we will go fusing the colors and removing the excess of paint at the same time. The more color we remove, the softer the fading will be. You should not eliminate the entire color or you will undo the effect. Only your intuition will tell you when you have mixed enough colors. At the beginning, a subtle appearance is preferable because later we can repeat the process as much as we want. In this case, we insist on applying the blue color again since in the previous phase it was too soft. To give more chromatic richness to the surface, we will add one more color to our model. We will only apply it in some areas to make it much more irregular. Finally, we have achieved a very real and worn-away appearance. We can also make the exact counter effect to the fading. Using more bright and intense colors, we can improve some areas that have been left very dull or too worn away. First, we wet the surface a little with thinner, so that it facilitates the work of stumping the colors. Then, we will work with the oils, painting and stumping. We can also use this technique to create areas with a very rusty appearance. The method is the same. We can create shaded areas using very dark colors. Another effect that we can achieve with the oils is the controlled illumination of some panels or areas, especially those that have come out very dark in the previous phases. This will give more contrast to our tank. The blue color is very useful for creating shadow effects over the green color, giving it greater color value. There is no doubt that the oil is very versatile and we can create all types of fading effects, lights, and shadows. Although, like all techniques, we should not exceed in its use so that it is not very noticeable when finishing the scale model. Most of the vehicles always present streaking effects, be it of grime, dirt, or mud and dust. Although making these effects is very simple, the main difficulty is in choosing the colors correctly for each case. Specific products exist for each effect which can help us solve the problem, although as always, we can take a risk to make our own homemade mixtures. By the way, the streaking effects of dust are called rain marks. We are going to make a streaking effect of general grime. After shaking the AK12 streaking grime color well, we will draw small irregular lines with a fine brush. After a few minutes, we will use the AK11 white spirit to stump each one of the lines. A small flat brush is perfect for this task. We will begin stumping the lines with vertical movements and little by little instead of doing it all at once. If we want more intensity, we can repeat the process. The result is very effective and realistic, and as we have been able to see, it is very simple to do. If we want to add streaking effects to our model, it is not necessary to make the fading effects beforehand with oils. Apply this technique after having made filters. We will now make streaking rust using the AK13 color. These new products always show the effect that we can achieve in the rear part of the label, which will help us out a lot. We should apply these stains over some chipping that we have previously painted with a dark color. The same as before, we will draw small irregular lines under some of the chippings, trying to distribute them randomly and without overdoing it. And once again, we will stump them with a brush and thinner. Here we can see the whole process of the rust once again, from the initial chippings to the streaking effects. We recommend that you make the chips with acrylic colors. Lastly, it is necessary to point out that it is easy to get lost and make an excess of rust lines which could possibly ruin our model. It is important to be moderate and not to abuse this technique. Don't forget it. As we have already said before, the streaking dust caused by the rain is called rain mark. On this side of the model, the rain marks have already been made. We can observe the vertical lines of dust made with enamel products. We don't recommend making this effect with acrylics. The color Dust Effects AK15 is perfect to make rain marks. Once shaken, we can use it directly. We can combine it with the Earth Effects AK17 to give more chromatic variety, everything stumped with white spirit. In this case, and contrary to the streaking effects of grime, we will draw the lines from bottom to top. This is very important. As you can see, this product is lightly translucent. Now we will stump the lines with white spirit and a flat brush. This is the quickest and simplest way of making a few rain marks. Also, the advantage of making it with enamels is that if the result is bad, we can always correct it. We have always believed that the best way to make mud was with blended pigments with plaster of Paris, but it is not. There's a much simpler way to make it, and it is mixing enamel colors with plaster. The difference is that when we use pigments, we never know what the resulting color will be because the pigment is dry. And when becoming moist and drying off again, the color considerably changes. This never happens when using enamels, and the fresh color is almost always the same when it is dry. We should always first make the dry mud. We have made a mixture of dust and earth colors with enamels. To this mixture, we will add some plaster of Paris to thicken it. And we can always add white spirit if we thicken it too much. The plaster of Paris will give volume to our dry mud. Add the plaster of Paris to the color mixture little by little. Use an old brush to stir the two components. Now we have the perfect mixture to be able to make splashes. It is important to put the brush in front of the splash zone, and with an airbrush, we will project air over it. We should always begin with the less visible areas. With less paint, we will make the splashes on the sides. The dry splash mud is already made. Now, with darker colors, we will make the wet mud. We will repeat the same process, but this time somewhat thicker. The hull of the tank deserves special attention. It is very visible. When there is little paint left in the brush, we will do the sides. Now, using the color Fresh Mud AK16, we will make wet mud streaked in the hull of the chassis. It is important to try to avoid monotony and regularity. Draw vertical lines randomly, varying the thickness. In the rear part, you can make smaller sized lines. In summary, as you've been able to see in this chapter, making mud is very simple when we use the appropriate technique. Of course, there are many types of mud and many forms of making it, but the enamel gives us, once again, the quick solution. The wet effects and accumulated oil are perhaps the effects most looked for by the current modelers. Although as everything, if it is done badly, it can destroy our tank. We are going to see in some simple steps how to make different types of greases or spilled oil, of course with enamels. These are oil or wet effects that we have made on this side of the tank. The effects of spilled oil can be in horizontal areas, but they can also appear in vertical areas. It is difficult to determine if they are oil or wet effects from the black and white photos. Let us begin with some horizontal effects, since we will make these under the turret. We can make a mixture of dark brown, black, glossy varnish, and white spirit to make the mixture. The mixture should be a little transparent and diluted. Once the first forms are drawn, you can add white spirit to simulate the driest grease. Once the turret is placed, we can see the resulting effect. We are now going to make spilled oil on the sides. Use the same mixture as used previously to make this new effect. Contrary to the streaking effects, now we should not stump the vertical stains that we draw. It is very important not to abuse this technique. A little bit of streak grease can be sufficient to give a very realistic effect. Remember, less is more. Lastly, we will make the classic spilled oil in the form of clouds that accumulate around the engine area. In this case, we should work with different color intensities, adding more white spirit to the mixture. It is always important to begin with the most diluted mixture. It will be the layer that covers most of the surface. Draw big clouds combined with small points. Try to contrast different components with the oil. Now, with a thicker mixture, we will paint more recent grease stains. They should occupy less surface. The most important thing to keep in mind when we make grease is not to overdo it, and to only paint small areas. If we exaggerate it, the result can be unattractive. It is always preferable to be conservative. And this has been everything about the basic techniques with enamels. Now is the moment to apply these techniques. Thank you.